Making a response video to my group members was kind of difficult because even though we all started off with the same topic, I don't think our presentations ended up really being about the same thing. I kind of took the prompt in a different direction from everybody else. I was mostly focused on whether or not concealed carry should exist at all, whereas the other members of my group mostly talked about the enforcement of concealed carry, such as whether or not you should need a permit in order to carry, and how hard to get those permits should be. And I'm glad that both aspects got talked about because I think that they are both valuable conversations to have. And in fact, I was originally planning on saying a few things about the enforcement aspects and about gun control in general, but my speech ended up pushing the time limit even without that stuff, so I just decided to stay focused on the one issue. And in retrospect, I do think that their topic was definitely the more relevant one for us right now because that was a conclusion I came to after I watched Jessica's video in which she brought up the new Missouri law that was passed in January that made it so that you don't need a permit or training in order to concealed carry. And that was a great point for her to bring up because I have to admit that I had not been aware of this law because I don't live in Missouri and I don't really keep up with its news, especially gun-related news because I don't own a gun. But if I had known about it before recording my speech, I probably would have focused on those aspects instead because they're so relevant because I'm in Missouri most of the year and obviously whether people carry guns there is something that could end up affecting me. But I'm ultimately glad that I didn't do that because that's what everybody else focused on, and I think the fact that I interpreted the prompt differently allowed me to cover some ground that no one else was really covering, whereas if I had talked about enforcement, a lot of my points would have been redundant since my group members already talked about it so much in their videos. While I didn't address it in my original video, I do agree with my group mates that if concealed carry is going to be allowed, there should be tighter restrictions on who is allowed to carry. And all the points made by my group mates come together to really form a strong argument for why concealed carry rights should be restricted. Victoria makes the point that if you're going to be trusted with the right to carry around a gun, you should be forced to go through a background check and receive gun safety training in order to be permitted to carry. While Michael brought up the issue of suicide and how potentially suicidal people shouldn't be allowed to use a gun and or carry a gun rather, and that tighter restrictions on carrying guns will decrease suicides. And I agree with both of their points on those issues, and I would like to see stricter limits on who can carry a gun. As I've already mentioned, Jessica's point about the new Missouri law, which I'm not at all a fan of, I don't think that you should be able to carry a gun without getting a permit and going through training and going through a background check and all that stuff. Unfortunately, I couldn't watch Abigail's video due to technical difficulties, and I don't think Mitchell posted one, so I didn't get to hear either of their thoughts on the matter. But in general, all of the group members whose thoughts I was able to see were in favor of a tighter restriction on concealed carry laws. I generally agree with this stance. In fact, I would take it one step further and say that I think the act of buying a gun should be more regulated in general, not just as it relates to concealed carry. I would be in favor of mandatory mental health checks for anyone buying a gun and elimination of loopholes like people being able to buy guns from private sellers or gun shows or whatnot with virtually no regulation whatsoever, which means that anybody can get their hands on a gun if they really want to, which kind of renders any restrictions official gun buying channels might have to be ultimately pointless until those restrictions are also applied to private sellers. And once you combine that with the fact that in some states like Missouri, these mentally ill or otherwise unfit people can not only buy guns but can carry them around with them at all times with no fear of legal trouble, and suddenly I'm starting to feel really uncomfortable with the whole idea. And I probably should have clarified in my original speech that I'm only in favor of concealed carry as a concept if we can have proper regulations on it, which Missouri no longer does. I don't really have much to say on the topic of disagreeing with other people's arguments or them changing my mind or anything like that, because like I said, we pretty much just talked about different issues, so there were no stances that were really in conflict with mine at all. And even on the issue where we could have disagreed, I think I take more or less the same stance that all of my group members took. Though there were a couple of points that they made that I hadn't thought about that opened my eyes to things I hadn't considered before, such as the suicide angle and the new Missouri law. So overall, we were kind of just one big happy family when it came to this issue, or possibly just a bunch of sheep, one of the two, but I think I'll go with the first one. That one sounds a lot better.